7 o'clock on the nose. We'll call the meeting to order. Start with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so our first order of business, since our past chair is no longer on the board, I'm in charge of starting this thing without Margaret for the first time in 10 years. It's a little sad. So our first order of business is election of a chair, and so the floor is open to nominations.
I nominate Steve Fleischman to serve as chair of the Woodbridge Board of Education.
I second the nomination.
Other nominations?
Move that we close the nominations for chair.
I'll second that.
All in favor of closing the nominations?
What is your, did you hear that, Paul? Could you hear that?
Yeah, I go for Steve.
Thanks, Paul.
You're in favor of closing nominations?
Okay, no closing.
Okay.
We would do a secret ballot, but since there's only one nominee, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
What's your vote, Paul? Okay, there we know.
Okay, and now, next up on the agenda is election of a vice chair. I take nominations from the floor.
How about Megan? I nominate Megan.
I didn't hear that one, I'm sorry.
I'll nominate.
I'd like to nominate Lynn.
Not me, you. Paul, so Megan was nominated, and then also Lynn was nominated for vice chair. Is there a third one? I'm sorry, was that?
No, just me. Are there any other nominations?
I'll nominate Joy Shavers. Crowded field.
Any other nominations? Okay, I need a motion to close nominations. Second. All those in favor of closing nominations? Okay, so we'll do a ballot. Piece of paper.
I didn't have ballots, so you can let any way you would like.
All right. Say everyone take a piece of paper and write who it is. And I'm going to take you off speaker and have Bob Gilbert get your vote. Paul, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so Paul, each person is voting for either Megan Genovese, MPS, or Joyce as the vice chair, so let me put okay. All right. Thank you very much. Hold on, we got more to go. Hold on.
There's only one problem with this, is I'm not able to tell who's voting for who.
Oh, you're supposed to.
I do have to record the votes officially,
Okay.
so, how
Would
to
you
do it again?
Would you like
Do
to
it again.
recast with
Do
your
it again.
name, write your name?
So the name of the CD is Pat.
By who, right? So it's.
Take it. I just have to do mine. That makes sense.
together.
Right, Jim Townsend.
So we probably.
Okay, that's fine, just
Okay.
making sure.
Congratulations, Lynn is our new vice chair.
Did you hear that, Paul?
Okay, and while we're taking nominations for secretary, I'll nominate Megan Genovese for secretary.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Joyce.
Okay.
Other nominations? Okay, someone move to close nominations? We do close?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of closing nominations? By virtue of there being one candidate, all in favor of Megan Genovese for secretary? You got that, Paul? You're in?
Got that, Paul?
Yeah, which one I need?
Megan Genovese was the only person nominated, and she is now the secretary, as she has been.
I vote for Megan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Next up is correspondence. What was your pleasure?
You're on, you done? Paul?
No correspondence.
Yeah, you're done with the election, so do you want to get off so much?
Summer break.
Okay, all right, thanks very much, okay? Good to talk to you, yeah, bye.
Okay, next up we have the consent agenda. We need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Does anyone have anything they want to extract from the consent agenda? None? Is there a second for the motion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. Reports. Want to chat about board retreat?
Right, I'll just start off, and then, so as you all know, you might remember from some of the board updates, August 19th is a Monday. Instead of our regular board meeting on August 19th, we will be having our annual board retreat that evening, scheduled from 5 to 9, scheduled here in the library, as we've done in the past few years. For that meeting, we have from CABE, Connecticut Association of Boards of Education, one of the leaders of that organization, Patrice McCarthy, and she'll be here to guide us in that retreat. That would typically look like working with us to clarify, and especially for new board members, but for all of us, the board members and superintendents, as a leadership team, reviewing roles and responsibilities, and then also assisting the board in talking about the year ahead, looking at how you can, how we're going to set board goals, the things we're going to work on, and anything like regarding that. I think one of the things that will be important between now and August 19th is for the new chair and myself to have an opportunity to talk to Patrice over the phone, certainly to clarify and make sure we're on the same page. So that's just at least a starting conversation for the board retreat. If anybody has any questions or any additions to that? Questions?
Okay, committee assignments. So we have a few standing committees, and so typically after this meeting, normally everyone sort of emails me, the chair, kind of what committees they're interested in. So we have finance, policy, facilities, and curriculum. And so we need chairs for those committees, and we need people to serve on those committees. So if you have an interest in anyone in particular, let me know. Don't just give me one, try to give me two. And then sometime in the next week, we'll get out committee assignments. So
Facilities?
So there's facilities, there's finance, there's policy, and there's curriculum.
And if you're part of the committee, you'd be like a corresponding member of the committee, and also like, or like you're part of the committee, you're part of the committee. I'm
What do you mean corresponding?
So like, I'm opposed from my engineering society, we have, different engagement in the committee. So if you're like a member of the committee, you're at one level of engagement, but you're a corresponding member, then you get like minutes and stuff like that.
So as a member of the board of Ed, you are free to go to every committee meeting and be a participating member of those committees. We want to make sure there's at least 2 members of the board of Ed at each of the committee meetings. And from that, we typically choose one board of Ed member to chair that committee. So you can be a chair or a member, but if you want to sit on finance, but you have an interest in facilities, you can go to those as well. Everyone's open to it at these meetings.
Steve, if people have interest in more than one committee, should they rank order their preferences, or
Sure.
is that helpful?
Yeah. Questions about committees?
Is there a deadline to, I'm sorry, did you say?
Ideally, if we can get it to me next week or so, it'd be great to have them so that we can start scheduling meetings. Is there a PTO update? And you're up, Bob.
Okay. Well, first of all, welcome to everybody for our first meeting of the 2019-20 school year, and especially a welcome and congratulations to all of our new board members and returning board members. It's good to see all of you here. So thank you for making this time during the season of vacations and being away and all of that. I have just a few announcements, not many tonight, so I'll just review those briefly. We just spoke a little bit about the board retreat, so you know that that's coming up on August 19th, so it's important for us to have everybody there for this particular opportunity to get together and really hear about the roles, responsibilities, and thinking about and planning for our work for the year. We will be back to you in just, again, each week to just reaffirm that time on August 19th. The administrative team, made up of principal, assistant principal, special ed director, and myself, Gina, Lisa, Cheryl, and I had an opportunity to spend 2 days this week off-site reflecting on the past year and also planning for next year. This has become a regular, important annual event for us to really do some off-site reflection without being interrupted and being able to get ready for the next school year. So that was very beneficial, and thank you to my administrative colleagues for that time. Summer curriculum work is ongoing. We're not going to be reporting on that until the fall when all that work is done and we can come back to you with what has been accomplished and where we are in the process for that. But know that lots of good curriculum work plans are in place and in process. Summer programs. We are midway through a very successful summer program season. Summer enrichment, summer scholars, summer special education, and an extended day, along with our sister programs from the recreation department, have kept the Beecher humming all season long, and a smile on many faces of students and smiles on parents as well. We'll provide again, as we always do, a brief report in the fall about the summer programs that took place and the highlights to those. This evening you'll be hearing in just a few moments the Panorama survey presentation, a high-level presentation, a summary, and so that'll be happening in a few moments. Enrollment, we typically, most months, report on enrollment. We will not be doing that at this point because enrollment is very fluid in the summer with many families coming and going and still kindergartners registering. So we hope to be back with some specific information in August as we approach the start of the school year. As you've probably read from one of my board updates, assignment of teachers, as you know, it's been our practice for the last several years. Beecher Road School families receive notification during the summer that will include students' class placement and the teacher name. If parents have questions and they happen to ask you, board members, about what's going on or why is it done that way, please explain that we need the flexibility of waiting to the summer and seeing how the move-ins and move-outs have taken place to assure that we continue to maximize the class size guidelines and the size of our classes for the benefit of children, the benefit of our students. So you're going to encourage parents to reach out to the administrative team to ask any questions about that if they have. On a facility update, as you know, we had important Phase 1 HVAC work done and completed during the April vacation. They are completing really during the course of these weeks right now, trend data from that Phase 1 work, to assess it and then to validate it and then hopefully start the Phase 2 HVAC work that will complete the work that was anticipated to be done. The annual publication of The Bridge, which is really the annual report for Beecher Road School and the Woodbridge School District, is done. It is coming out in the mail to your homes and all the homes in... Has anybody got it, by the way, yet? Anybody received it? Not yet, okay. So it's any day now. It'll be coming to all the mailboxes for the entire town. So we hope that you'll enjoy reading that edition that celebrates what took place during the 18-19 school year. The last of my announcements is that at last week's Board of Selectmen meeting, as I always attend that each month, I brought an update to the Board of Selectmen on a number of items. And one of the items that the Board of Selectmen, and specifically Beth Heller, our first selectman, has made a determination on is that she is setting up a short-term committee that will encompass a number of town departments and school to further look and to further refine, making sure that we're all working in concert, if you will, or in tangent when we have lockdowns or other emergencies. So more information will follow. I'll probably talk to you more about that in August, but Beth is planning that committee to bring the fire chief and the police chief and myself and others together, as well as a consultant to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed in the best interest of the important area of safety. So that completes my report, and if it's okay with our new board chair, just to kind of continue the announcements, Mrs. Prisco has just a little update on at least one item. I know that.
So, hello everybody, welcome to summer. As has been the practice, each summer the Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, our PDEC committee, volunteers their time and they gather together in the summer as we lay out the school year and what our plans for professional learning are for our teachers. And increasingly we are looking at our teacher assistants to see what professional learning that we can provide for them in the limited amount of time that we have. So we look across all our faculty meetings, all of our PD days, not only just in August, but across the school year. So that team is coming together tomorrow. We've taken across the year, last year, we keep track of things that people suggest and offer to make sure that we keep them on our radar and make sure that they fit in with the district goals as well, so that we can provide differentiated learning for our staff. So we're going to meet tomorrow.
Report is the Panorama survey results presentation. So we will show a little slide presentation. It's duplicated in your packet. So we are still digging into these results, but we are bringing this presentation to you. It's information that's recently come to our attention. It's our annual opportunity to take a look at the stakeholder feedback for continuous improvement as guided by our survey vendor, Panorama Surveys. I will be very transparent to say that right out of the get-go that these results were disappointing to us. They were somewhat sobering, and in some ways they were somewhat surprising to us. And then also, in reflection, these results maybe weren't surprising in some ways, in some of the areas, given the context of last year, the 2018-19 school year. So the things that we were confronted with last year, more students coming through our doors, more students with special needs that we did not anticipate, and a lot of teacher assistant assignment changes. We had level staffing, but more kids to address. There was certainly a lot of concern on the part of some of our staff in terms of assignment changes that took place not only at the beginning of the year, but during the year. As in any given school year, there's always school decisions that are made, and some of those have an impact on the climate and morale. And finally, our budget process last year certainly felt a stress point and a challenge. So these are just some context of last year, and I want to make sure I'm clear to say that with some people asking why are the results as they are, those are some things that occur to us, but I will say also that these results and the items I've just mentioned are not an excuse for anything. They are just simply observations and reflections. We have a lot of work to do, and we do see this as an opportunity to do that work and to accentuate the positive and move to the positive. This is meant to be a high-level summary presentation, and so as we move through it, and Gina and I will try to move through that fairly briskly, we certainly would want to hear your questions at the end, so if you can just bear with us and let us move through it, and we'll certainly address questions as we can or get back to you with answers that we may not have at our disposal. So, as you know, this is not a change. The purpose of our surveys over the years is an opportunity for stakeholder feedback, families, students, teachers, and staff. This is one data point for our continuous improvement. This does meet the climate survey requirements the state lays out for us. It is part of our evaluation plan and the components of how the evaluations are metrically arrived at. And it's also an opportunity for us to measure growth in targeted areas, as we just specifically set out some target areas this past year. An overview a little further is that, again, as I mentioned, this is a high-level summary. Our family survey, ones that our parents fill out, this has been administered for the longest period of time out of any of them. 2014, 16, 18, and 19. These were district-created questions back in 2014. They were not created questions by Panorama, and they were not normed nationally as the other questions for student, teacher, and staff. The student, teacher, and staff surveys were administered for the first time last year, and these are Panorama-created questions and normed as well. And as mentioned already in the last bullet there, you know that who our vendor is, and how we get the surveys to each family, and for that matter, students get them in the school, and so do staff.
So for participation, for our family responses, we've had steadily about 1/4 of our families. We did have 50% of our families, a little more than 50% in 2016. But again, about 1/4 of our families are responding. So when thinking of the percentages, we're thinking 1/4 of that number of folks. Student responses, we have a little more control over that as they are administered here, so in the above 90th percentile. If a student is not here, we are not going back, if the very next day we may, if we have a chance, we will give the survey, but we are not repeatedly, like going after students to say, oh, you didn't take this, you didn't take this. We have above 90%, and we want to make sure that the students in grades 3 through 6, including that grade 4, have an input into this survey. And teacher and staff responses, certainly all of our staff are encouraged to respond. A little bit of a dip in percentages this year, not much, but a little bit. And we, again, for the grades that your children are in. So this is 149 families responding, but that equates to about 172 children. So in looking at that, it's pretty equitable, K to 5, the distribution of the number of responses and the percentages of that. 6th grade, small number of families responding, and I don't have an answer for that at the moment. Maybe they have done the survey a number of times, and say, I've done this. I don't have an answer for that, but 6th grade, it does tend to drop just a bit. The years that your children are attending Beach are, again, 149 families represented, but if you look at year 2, so what we aren't able to glean from this is, are these families that just have 2nd graders, and maybe they have students in other ages, but in other grades, or is it a family in 6th grade that just arrived here as a 5th grader? So we aren't sure, we can't tell what that is, but highest number of response, families that have been here for 2 years, whether, again, that's a kindergarten and 1st grade, or a 5th and a 6th grade. So we are keeping that in mind. Again, small participation, 7 years or more, families that have been here for a long time.
So now get into the different surveys, and we'll start with the family parent survey, and as you know, you've received, as a board, you've received the detail of every single question. Each one of these topic areas, engagement, climate, school fit, leadership, has a number of questions behind them. This is meant to be a high-level summary as you take a look at all of those together. As a reminder, as I mentioned earlier, the family parent survey is the one we've been using the longest. It was created district created. There are no norms, so just bear with that. This is really our highest results. There are some slight decreases since last year's, as you can see. Family engagement 2% less than last year, which really equates to about 3 people, and right down the list. I think it's important to also, I noticed we've been digging into the details of this. So the parent-family survey, through all the years we've done it, consistently has not included the neutral responses in the denominator or the numerator. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And which are those neutral responses? It's the ones, if you look in your detailed attachment, it's all those gray answers. Answers such as if someone chose neither agree or disagree. Those are not counted in the numerator or denominator. That was several years ago. That was a decision made when it was first created. Our next area is the teacher responses by topic again, and these do have norms. Let me say from these responses, the teacher responses, the staff ones, which you'll see on the next slide, and then the student ones. These are Panorama generated questions. These are nationally normed by percentile, and there are no neutral responses that they recognize. So what does that mean? All of the responses, all of those middle responses that you might think, like the other one, they are all counted in the denominator. All the middle responses. So anything that was mentioned, like neither negative or positive as a choice, or the words sometimes or somewhat or same, those are all, they may be construed as middle responses or neutral, but they are all counted in the denominator. And if you're looking at the other attachment that you received, anything in orange, those are usually the orange colored answers, those are the ones that make that up. So the responses you can see here by teachers, these were disappointing for us, seeing changes in the negative in all of the different areas that we saw here. Especially it was very disappointing because we needed to spend some time on some of these types of things like school climate and behavior, on feedback and coaching, which was an area that the administrative team purposed to provide more of. It did not bear out in the results. Also, for those of you who just want to have that validated, what was the national percentile that our results fell into on this page? The staff and leadership and professional learning, the top two ones, those were both in the 40 to 59th percentile nationally normed segment. The other three, climate, leadership, and feedback and coaching, was in the 20 to 39 percentile segment nationally. As I move to the staff responses, I am just very honestly saying that these were the most disappointing that we have looked at and analyzed and have taken note of. These are the lowest responses in terms of change from last year that we had. All of the responses on a national norm basis are in the lowest segment, the 0 to 19th percentile nationally. And again, the surprise part for us and the disappointment part was knowing that we had spent time on climate and on professional learning with working on behavior, working on providing resources, a book on choice words, for working with students, trying to provide more feedback and coaching. It did not bear out in the results. And it's very obvious it did not bear out that way. Our last group of stakeholders is our students. And from all the 4 groups, in terms of change from last year, this is the most favorable responses and results that we show. But I will say, holding ourselves accountable and holding ourselves to high standards, these changes are not as high as we hoped for or expected. So while the 4 out of 5 moved in the positive direction, we would have expected and wanted to see greater change in that direction. In terms of a national norm, as I'll go down, the rigorous expectations, we were in the 60th, 79th national percentile. Our results for school safety were in the 80 to 99th percentile nationally. School teacher student relationships were in the 40 to 59th percentile nationally. School belonging, they did not provide a norm to the national because we had to add a state question to that one that the state asks us to add to all of our surveys, and that was not part of Panorama's data bank. And that question is there one trusted, do I know one adult who I can feel trusted with in the school? And so that's the question that was added. So we do not have a norm percentile because of adding one in. And finally, school climate was 20 to 39 percentile. And again, as I mentioned, this teacher, the staff, and the students, again, there are no neutral responses, so everything was included. All those middle responses were included in the denominator and numerator. Again, these student results were, while we're glad that the arrows are facing up, we're still not satisfied with the fact that we spent a lot of time working on behavior in the building, working on helping kids to feel better in their classrooms. And so, bottom line is they're higher, but they're not as high as we want. We have a couple of target questions that we spent this year, and I've already alluded to those. Gina will talk a little bit about the questions for students and the target questions for staff and teachers.
So the one for students at your school, how much does the behavior of others help or hurt your learning? So clearly up 2% from last year, not indicative of what we had hoped for or what we had thought we had worked towards. Some of the things that were done to kind of work towards this, as many of you may be aware, we created an additional classroom as well as worked in some supports for students with challenging behaviors to try to minimize the impact on students in the classroom. So that was something that we worked very hard. School-wide expectations, as part of Responsive Classroom, what does it mean to be a member of this learning community? What are the expectations, as simply as how do we travel from in the hallways? What are our expectations when we're gathered together as a school community? We reviewed those with students often. Ms. Sherman, Ms. Mammon, and myself, our doors are always open for students who might be having difficulty with another student, as well as our support staff. So clearly we need to do a little more work in this area and make sure that our students are able to be learning in the best environment that they can be. And if others are impacting that, then we need to do some more work with those students. So if you take a look at the percent of favorable responses, so these 5th graders are now our 6th graders, and they are the students that we look at as role models at the school. And it was this particular grade that had the lowest response, so we will be meeting with our 6th graders to help to develop, what is it that we can do, what is it that they can do. This will be forthcoming in the fall. What is it that we can do and they can do to help make sure that we are all following the expectations to allow for the best possible learning environment. Target question for teachers and for staff. So this is how much feedback. This year we set some targets for ourselves as administrators, not only to track the formal evaluations, but also to make sure that we were getting into other classrooms, making sure that we were providing feedback in multiple ways, either by an email or even a note or a verbal conversation. And by virtue of our evaluation process, our teachers do receive more feedback than our staff, which are our non-certified members of the faculty. And we need to figure out a way at this point, how can we get more feedback for our teacher assistants? Because clearly it's representative that they are feeling like they haven't had enough. We are making an assumption that they want more, so digging deeper, it's for us as an administration, do they need that feedback from the resource teacher that they work with? Do they need that feedback from the grade level team they work with? Do they need that from us? So we need to do a little work in this area, and this has to go beyond our formal evaluation process. If you go ahead and just look at the next slide, it is a trend then through many of the questions that folks that have been here at Beecher Road or in this profession for a smaller number of years have shown some more favorable responses. Well, it is also for our teacher evaluation plan, for our formal plan, a teacher who's been here less time gets more feedback by virtue of the plan. So if your first 4 years here at Beecher as a new teacher, you are having far more formal exchanges with your administrator because you are new to the profession. So that may certainly contribute to that type of a response.
The next slide is a slide that might be familiar to you from last year. We've been tracking over the past few years for the family, the parent survey, specific target questions that we wanted to move forward. And so you can see 1 year more out, 2019, where those are. So for historic purposes, we wanted to see where we were. And so there are, again, some surprises. Again, high numbers for the most part, but surprises and questions in our minds. As a board, you might remember the communication that report that has been presented the last 2 years and the variety of ways we do communication, and also adding in Swift K-12 this year. But there was a decline in that. There was an increase in opportunities of interest outside the core content areas. Differentiating instruction, while nothing has changed with that, and we continue to work on that, and even some enhancing that through a number of conversations that we've had recently with our enrichment ad hoc committee and other ways. There was a downturn there, which we're not sure why, because nothing has changed with how we try to deliver that. The next question, I think many of us have chimed in the past about this question that was created years ago here and has been part of the school-created Panorama survey is ambiguous. The amount, level of difficulty of homework. We continue to track it, but I have to say that we're not sure if the answer is, I think it should be more, I think it should be less, I think it should be more difficult, I think it should be less difficult. So we know, but we're continuing to track it just from the perspective of trying to be consistent and true to the areas that we looked at. The next one really perplexes us, especially when we just came from our finance subcommittee, because a lot of time has been spent over the past few years on food choices, a salad bar that many people would hope their school would have. We've had visits from neighboring school districts coming to see the lunch program because of what they've heard about it, and a bottom line that is healthier than you can imagine for a food program, but yet and a participation rate that continues to really grow and grow and grow, yet the numbers are down for some reason. And then finally, the report card communication. Again, while it's still a high number, slipped a little bit, and the question there is we've spent some time providing and constructing report card rubrics that help understand or help parents understand what is a grade mean and what does a score mean, and yet numbers can still be here. So we wanted to be true to that chart from the past few years. And likewise, the next slide just basically provides us the big buckets. Here are the big buckets of our questions and how it may move through the years. They've stayed in the 80s and 90s, and there again has been some movement there, obviously, as well. But again, this is just provided as a historical trend. One more year. So I think we want to certainly share some of our reflections to date. This is not necessarily an exhaustive list of reflections because we're still digging into this. We're still reflecting on what are our next steps or other areas that we haven't had a chance to really, or surprises. But here are the reflections, and Gina and I will just kind of go back and forth and talk a little bit about these.
Certainly pleased that our strongest results were found in the students. Certainly we are here for them, but we need our teachers and our staff to also be feeling comfortable and confident in the work that they're doing. So it's not as high as we like. We'd like to raise that up. the disappointment. So we, again, as I stated, we implemented some practices and had, in some of the conversations that we've had with teachers on things that they've tried and things that haven't worked, and then gone back and tried something else, we were definitely not happy with the responses and the percentages that came back to us.
I mentioned at the very beginning of the presentation that sometimes a year has contextual occurrences or events or whatever it might be, and so the timing of the survey coincided with some of those challenging events, and the budget is one of those. Certainly that can have an impact, but I also want to be very clear to say that we're not looking at that as an excuse or something that we rest all of our concerns in that area. We are taking all of this certainly as information to move forward and make the best of the opportunity. I also want to mention, and I think it was reflected in one of the earlier comments and slides, that we did see different responses based upon staff experience levels. So we tended to see that the staff who've been here between 0 to 2 years, 6 to 10 years, even in the middle there, 3 to 5 years, had higher favorable response rates, both teachers and staff members, than those who've been here for a longer period of time. It doesn't mean it's good, bad, or otherwise. It's just simply an observation to make and to help us reflect on it. How do we change that?
The student gains, as I said, they're positive, and knowing on that target question the behavior of others. So the actions that we've taken to try to minimize impact student to student, we certainly have to look at and see what other things we can put in place to make sure that students are learning in an environment that is not impacted by student behavior.
And in these surveys, as an individual, you sometimes take information, you say, wow, I need to do something differently, I need to do more of something, less of something else, or change it up. And so, as a superintendent, what I took from this is that I need to increase my contact with families and increase my contact with teachers and staff, and perhaps also change it up a little bit. It may not just be simply, hi, how are you, I forgot your name, but can you tell me, how are things working out for your kid? How are things working out for your family? And actually asking some specific questions, which will be more qualitative and ultimately more valuable than just simply a hello and a handshake. So I've certainly taken something from this to make me think a little bit about my own interactions moving forward.
Can I speak for Lisa, Cheryl, and myself first as to how can we either delegate or divide to make sure that we have sacred time in classrooms, and that if the radio goes off that someone needs some support somewhere. If I'm in a classroom, my colleagues we know that at this hour, at this time, I am out in classrooms, or they're out in classrooms, and one of the other members will respond, or how can we increasingly engage our other supports here at Future to make sure that we put that focus of instruction back on the forefront. And again, behavior is there as well, so we have to make sure that we're handling both of those things, but it's about looking at how we can do that a little bit better. And it's also about talking to teachers, talking to staff. Yes, this is a survey, yes, they clicked a box, but we don't necessarily exactly know what, in some of these questions, the teachers or the teacher assistants or the custodians or the secretaries, the staff, what they are looking for in some of the questions that they filled out. So it is conversations. Is it more feedback? Did they not like some of the feedback that they received, and was that some of the issue? So we really have to do a little bit more talking to people to, if they're willing to dig into this, and we can do that through PLCs, we can do that through community meetings with our specialists.
And finally, so it really all comes down to this work that we need to do. We need to do in the specific bucket areas, I think, that are very obvious: the climate area, behavior area, and also the collaboration between leadership of the school and staff. So there is work to do for us to roll our sleeves up, which really leads to our next steps. And as I mentioned, this is not an exhaustive list of next steps. This is a starting point. We're still reflecting, still thinking, and wanting to make sure that our next steps are meaningful and have teeth in them. Again, one of the next things we'll be doing over the next days and weeks will be to share these surveys, these presentations, as well as the actual specific questions with our stakeholders, specifically our teachers and staff, as well as our parents. So that will be something coming out very, very soon. And also, as we move forward into the year, we want to expand and maximize the collaboration between the administration and our teachers and staff. A few of the examples of that will be that we're going to have more regular meetings with our WEA, that's the Teachers Union Executive Board, as well as having some regular contact with our teaching assistant leaders. There's co-presidents for that, to make sure that we are hearing the pulse, having the conversations, anticipating, being able to be proactive. We're also looking at trying to use the venue of the structure of the team leader meeting that happens on a regular basis, as we did last year for other kinds of decisions, to make sure we maximize that as a sounding board, as a working group, as a group of solutions.
So as we've gone from paper to digital, and just like paper and notebooks can get cluttered, the digital world can get cluttered. So the teachers have asked for us to return to a document, just to have at their hands some clear outlined procedures, protocols, things that they have but readily available. So we have been working on that, part of our retreat, in communication with the staff. Part of our retreat was to develop that document. And so the teachers will have a resource handbook, instruction, behavior, odds and ends for things that make Beecher function. And so hopefully that will help, and it'll all be in one place. And so we're going to continue to work on that.
As an administrative team, like we've already spoke a little bit about increasing our administrator visibility and feedback, and Gina spoke a little while ago about maximizing other staff members in terms of what are their roles and responsibilities. Is it an administrator job? Is it a teacher job in particular? Is it a school psychologist? Is it our BCBA, and so on and so forth? So we want to make sure that we're able to put people where they're supposed to be, and making sure that everybody's roles are very clear.
Teacher assistants, so we have been fortunate that they will be part of some of the additional professional development time that we are able to have this school year, and they are also part of, when we plan tomorrow, we will be planning for some more professional development, and that could just mean time with their teacher that they work with, their resource teacher, to learn more about the students that they are working with and the strategies and methods that work for those particular children that they have on their caseload this year.
And finally, we don't want to wait till next year's, next April or May's survey to figure out whether we got somewhere or not. We want to assess progress during the course of the year, and so that may take more possible focus groups. Certainly, keeping in contact with our teacher and teacher assistant leaders is another way, as I mentioned earlier. We want to make sure that progress is assessed, what we can change if something is attempted and is not working. In any given area, we want to make sure we can adjust that. So that brings us to the conclusion. Thank you for being willing to hear a high-level presentation, and some data that's not as hopeful as we had originally hoped, but an opportunity for us to move forward with a lot of work that's ahead of us. I'd like to take your questions, your comments, anything that might distract you.
I'm sure we will have a bunch of questions. Thank you for the presentation. I know when you're presenting not great results, it's a little harder, and especially knowing how much time and energy and effort you placed in improving climate and culture, and so I know it's frustrating. I have one quick question. So when you talk about norms and averages, is there any data based on school size? Because I'll always come back to this, which is, if you look at Orange, there's 3 elementary schools. None of them have more than 300 kids in a building. You have a principal. You have 10 to 15 classrooms at most. I assume from a climate and culture perspective, it's a little harder. Every grade has 5 classes. You have 30 teachers and 2 and a special services director, but really not. The ratio of teachers who need to be evaluated to administrators is not the same as a school that has, a 10 to 1, 10 teachers, 1 principal. So Is there any day, I mean, are we like a little at a disservice because we have 120 kids in a grade, whereas most schools have closer to 60 or 50 in a grade?
Don't have the answer to that, but it's an
Right,
interesting,
yeah,
it's an interesting question to ask Panorama. Don't know what they will have, if they will have something like that. But, so larger school sizes, and I think, sometimes the model, even to kind of thinking about your comment there, Steve, in middle schools, what we've seen over the years is the movement of the big middle school to smaller teams within a middle school, or houses within a high school, or at the secondary level. So to make it more of a community versus a huge, if you will, student factory. Those words have been used by others, not me, but we can check into that. I don't have anything offhand, but there's others.
Questions?
Before we delve into the substance, I just had a few questions. I still have not been able to access the 2018 family survey results. So on the website, on the Beecher Road School website,
Okay.
as well as the CAVE portal that we access our materials, it's still the 2016. So I was wondering if
Okay.
we
And
could
you and I
post-
had that email exchange, so that did not get replaced the way you anticipated?
So and I was using
Okay.
the 2016 for the last few months, thinking that it was 2018.
So we want to make sure that it's there and it's also easy to find.
Mhm.
So-
That would be great, thank you.
Okay, so you're saying the 16 are there, the 18 is not, is what you're saying?
2018 is not, just for the family survey. The other, yes.
As someone who doesn't have the knowledge, what's with 2017? It's like, doesn't exist.
So, when the surveys, when the 2014 family survey was created, that was before my time, so I'm only speaking from what I know, but there was a desire to have a survey, and at that point, the idea was, let's do it every other year. So 14 was done, then we did the family again in 2016, which is the one Mrs. Shavers is referring to, and then we felt that, why should we be doing it every other year, because there's valuable information each year. So in 2018, last year, we not only repeated the family survey, but we added the student, teacher, and staff one. And it's been our position at this point that we are looking at that as an annual event. So 18 has been done, all 4 stakeholder groups. 19 we just are seeing today, and then we would anticipate doing this again next spring.
To go back,
That's the history.
The history was actually, the board wanted this done, and there was a lot of hesitation to do survey of parents for, it took us a while, so that the first iteration was, we'll agree to do it every other year.
Understood, thank you.
The second issue I wanted to raise is one concern, as you know I have, which is with the family survey results. Taking out the neutral responses from the denominator leads to misleading presentation of how favorable the results are. So if you were to actually not include the neutral in the numerator, and you still include the neutral responses in the denominator, the results are actually quite different.
You're right. You're correct. Yes.
So the only thing I would tell, so just so you know historically where that came from, which I agree that the neutral should not be removed from any survey, but initially Panorama pushed that neutrals were positives, and that it was included in the positives, so it made our positives look really high, which they weren't because of the neutral responses, but they said that they viewed it as a positive. Again, typically what we've done is, most of the time we've redone the numbers ourselves, just to kind of look at them.
It's a pain in the neck, but yes, you can actually.
It's just adding back in.
Right. And I wish Jeff were here, because his background is in biostatistics. Having said that, there are different ways that we could present the data so that it's not misleading. One is you could show ratio of the favorable to the unfavorable. You could also show a pie chart showing favorable, neutral, and unfavorable, so that you can have a fuller picture of what's really going on. So that is, I understand the background, the history. But I think the data as it is presented currently is not really representative of what's going on.
And I think this is known, but I just want to make sure, so there was never an intention by my predecessors about doing anything misleading. When it was set in 2014 and then measured again in 2016, it was done consistently the same exact way.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that any leaders are misleading. I'm just saying that the way that the data is presented just happens to be misleading, that's all. So I'm not suggesting that.
And perhaps a good one to that point is that, you know, when Panorama does their national norm, and we saw it in the teacher, staff, and students, they don't recognize anything as a neutral response, so everything is either one way or the other. So I think, and therefore, those results are, in a sense, you'll notice them a little lower because they don't have that artificial, you know, positive, I guess you could say, so, yeah.
I mean, when I looked at the results, it seemed like you had made it artificially low because they pushed that neutral response low. Whereas if it's neutral,
They actually, what they do is they pull it out of the numerator and the denominator, so it's as if the neutral didn't even participate. So if you have, you know, it actually, in general, for most of the numbers, raises the percentage. And
well, I was saying the ones where they included it, and the other ones where it says
right on the parent, on the
Panorama.
staff,
Yeah.
the staff
ones, it makes it almost artificial because you have 3 negative answers and only 2 positive answers.
Actually, sometimes there's 4 negative answers and 2 positive answers, depending on, you can just, and the other attachment is color coded, basically.
Yeah.
Anything green is,
Does that, yeah.
anything orange is.
It almost seems like there would be benefit in purging it down to 2 and 2 and make people commit. Are you going to be negative or are you going to be positive? How negative you want to be and how positive?
Well, that's not really the intent of statistical analyses. I mean, it's to get a, you know, what we're looking at here essentially, regardless of positive or negative responses, are Likert scales. And if it's 5 questions, you're on a 1 through 5 Likert. If it's 6, you're on a 1 through 6. And that's really what you're seeing behind, what you're not seeing behind these numbers. It's really Panorama, and then in the case of the student survey, the district determines where you draw the line of positive or negative in those percentages. I think we're missing the point, we're going off on a tangent a little bit here. I think the board and the administration can discuss how to use neutral responses, but we can compare with the numbers that we have to national data, and that data, those data are consistent across the nation. I think Chairman Fleischman's recommendation to dive a little bit deeper there to see how we compare to the schools that are a similar size is quite relevant, as well as schools that are in that compare favorably to us in terms of our demographics and also probably looking at aspirant schools. You know, thinking about what Board Member Shavers was discussing in terms of if we include those neutral responses, that actually tends to bring the our response rate down a bit further. I think that the fact that I'm going to revert back to that we have data year over year, the overall trend here is rather alarming and concerning. And that's what I think that we should be, that we can discuss here. And how, you know, the two of you have talked a bit about recognizing that, of course, and thinking about how to move forward. I think that's going to be crucial for the board, and the immediate next stages is to say, how do we share this? How is this information shared with the constituents of staff, faculty, families, etc.? And then how are we going to move forward in eliciting? We can sit here and talk about what our ideas are for improving the situation until the cows come home, but I think it's really going to be crucial for the board and the administration to work closely with the faculty and staff, really, to say, what are we going to, you know, how can we improve this? And I would also, sorry, I realize I've been holding the shell for longer than I ought to. You know, to Chairman Fleischman's question of how do we compare to institutions or schools that are large like this, I think a fair question to ask as we try to support and also, challenge our administration here is there enough administrative support to carry out these, tasks of communication? That's obviously a major issue here of doling out the communication as well as receiving the feedback. And with a large school like this, is there enough administrative support? So,
I just have one other question, which is when we do Press Ganies in the hospital, which is our equivalent to Panorama testing, Press Ganey has, seminars, symposium to tell you when you're not performing well in this area, these are best practices from the highest performing schools. Does Panorama have sort of information to say when you're not performing well in this area, one of the interventions that has the highest impact factor when you're trying to improve that, does that exist from Panorama? Do we know?
They do. They have been working on that. Where that earlier, a few years ago, that was not part of their offerings and their resources, but they have, and we have not gotten back on the phone with them, which we need to. But they have been offering some sort of think tank ideas for districts. It's a new concept for them. So I'm not sure there's a long track record for that, but they do have. They have been offering that. Our follow-up is not just once with them and we don't see them until next year. We try to do some follow-up through the year. So that's something we can inquire as next steps as well.
Joyce?
Yeah, I'd like to follow on Todd's comments. When you look at survey data, what's important is to put it into perspective. And the way that you do it is you take a look at the trend line and you take a look at how we compare to others. And so when you look at the trend line, particularly with the teachers and staff, it is consistently down across the board. On top of that, when you look at the benchmarking data for the teachers now, there is in every single category, none of them exceeded the 59th percentile in terms of favorable responses. And for the staff survey results, it's even worse. We fell in no greater than the 19th percentile for every single category. And so when you look at that and you think of our town, we are Woodbridge, right? Woodbridge is a very privileged community from a lot of different perspectives. And people move here for our school. And I think people would be I agree with Todd's assessment that the results are alarming. And if you cross-reference it with the questions to the students about how often do your teachers seem excited to be teaching you, 61% are saying, are in the favorable category. How excited would you be to have the same teacher? 66% now. So I think you are seeing these cross-referencing type responses across the different groups. So whatever's happening with the teachers and staff clearly affecting what's happening at the student level.
Any other comments or questions?
One other thing that might be helpful for the board in deliberating moving forward is what do trends look like nationally? I know that in both the faculty and the staff's surveys, we were down pretty markedly, and we're in a percentile that I don't think that we're aspiring to be in. But is there a trend nationally that those at other schools are going? Is it dipping as well, which could point to larger social issues?
Right, well, to piggyback on that, wondering, so how are they normed? Is it Panorama data that are they getting data from multiple sources, or is it just Panorama surveys?
Panorama, so if they're given the survey, let's say in 2,000 school districts, they're nationally norming that.
Okay, so it's only schools that have purchased the Panorama
questions, so
program.
they have a set bucket of questions for climate, for school fit, for leadership,
Right.
or whatever it might be. So they're using their own data.
So it's possible that each of our items are actually coming from different schools because they might not be norming it from, because because not all the same schools are asking all the same questions, so it's possible they're actually.
So when I mentioned, for instance, let's say with the teacher one, so I mentioned like the first one, staff leadership relationships, we were in the 40 to 59th percentile. So that staff leadership bucket is about 8 to 10 questions, let's say. So any school across the country that chose that bucket of staff leadership relationships, like we did, would be measured against each other.
Right.
And put in that. That's what.
But each of those different buckets are not necessarily the same schools. It's just something.
That's
to think about.
correct. Yeah, that's
In terms of
correct. So
thinking of how
yes,
to
we
make
chose
more.
5 buckets that we felt, for each one that we felt were most pertinent.
Mhm.
Another school may have taken 3 of these and had 2 other buckets,
Right.
say, or.
Do we also know how often do they re-norm the data? Is it every year they do it, or is this comparing to data from 10 years ago or 5 years ago?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. One thing you guys mentioned was towards the end of assessing progress during the year, possibly using focus groups, and I would definitely encourage you to think about having a town hall or something with teachers before an not even just for assessing, but kind of gathering information now, like to get teacher feedback, get teachers feeling like they can speak how they're feeling and talk amongst each other perhaps, and I think maybe encouraging some talk amongst them and helping them feel heard might help the process move along.
So for instance, an example like that, that's a point. So tomorrow, Gina had mentioned that tomorrow is our annual summer opportunity to bring teachers from our PDEC committee, professional development and evaluation committee together to plan and further plan professional learning activities for the year for teachers, for teacher assistants. And so it's definitely our intention to share the essence of this tomorrow morning with the people who are going to come forward, because there's no reason not to. And it's an opportunity to say it's data that helps to think, okay, how do we need to keep this in mind in a very strategic way, or just in a very global and climate way in terms of how we move forward with the learning we're doing and the kinds of things we're doing and what we need to focus on. So,
Right.
So absolutely. One of the interesting.
Bob, can I just say one more
Sure,
thing? Sorry,
please,
before you move on.
yeah.
And I know there's a lot of things we're concerned about, but it is good to make sure you talk about the things that they're doing well too, right? Talking about where their strengths are, what's going well. It's honestly surprising that the student scores aren't lower, considering how much the teachers did drop. So in some ways, there is a buffering there. So perhaps if we can get the teachers feeling better about things and moving towards a more positive thing, then the students, percentages will hopefully dramatically increase then.
But actually, Megan, when you compare the student survey results nationally, in some of the categories, like for example, school climate, we fall into the 20th to 39th percentile. For school teacher-student relationships, we fall into the 40th to 59th percentile. In school rigorous expectations, we fall into the 60th to 79th percentile. So while the student survey results are more positive, I would say, they are still troublesome to see.
So I think from a percentile, you really need to see what the norms are, because I can tell you again, in Prescani, if you go up 1 point, you go from 65 to 66, you can move from the 47th percentile to the 85th percentile. So unless we know, we can say that these look terrible, but if 65% got us into the, let's say, 50th percentile, and 67 gets us into the 80th percentile, I just think we should know a little more about the norms, because I'm a little worried. A few years ago, Panorama didn't have any norm data because it was a new company. So I really, there's a little part of me that wants to know what is the norm group that we're comparing to, how many schools are actually involved in that. And we see, again, when we look at Prescani, we know how many academic medical centers, how many hospitals, we have exact data on what it is, and we know how much we have to move to get to the 90th percentile, the 95th percentile. I'd love to see that before we, I think we just need a little more time looking at this data. I think there's no doubt that all of us administrate, everyone is disappointed, but I think there's a little more information that we probably need to know.
So we've written down the comments and the questions, and absolutely, just a couple of
Can I just grab, Dan was gonna ask
Oh, please,
something.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to jump on what Todd said about comparing us to national, and I'm wondering that over the time frame where we've been evaluating this, has the state of Connecticut passed any kind of policy requirements that have limited the ability of the staff to affect change or control the environment, in the classroom, that makes it more difficult for staff? Because that could act as like a little inflection point on the data, is that, state of Connecticut passed a policy that limited our ability to maintain order in the classroom. And then you can see an inflection, or something like that. And if you compare us to maybe a different state that didn't pass the same legislation or passed different legislation, you might get a different inflection point from that state. I'm just curious if any of that data would be.
Yeah, I'll make one, just maybe related comment to that. That's an interesting thing to bring up. So, first of all, in terms of our behavior, in terms of management, we're guided by the least restrictive environment in terms of having students in their own school. So you can possibly keep a student whatever their challenges or strengths may be. There's also been a lot of statewide press. You may have heard a little bit about the classroom safety bill that was out there that had gained some traction but did not actually take place. So there was a lot of statewide attention to a bill where they really wanted to have to really track any time a student had an outburst, let's say, I'll use that word very loosely, and with a different kind of an enhanced and intent communication to parents, and other kinds of related things. So in a sense, there has been, because behavior in the classroom, student needs, student challenges is not a thing just to Woodbridge, just to other places, and it's gained a lot of attention. So there are some policies that are either in place or things that guide us that, but it's all schools, it's not just our school. So, we can reflect on that a little bit too. I do want to say, there was mentioned before, do we have the right number of, for an 850 student school, do we have the right number of administrators and so on and so forth. All I can say to that question, I think we've talked a little bit about that here on the board level. The one thing we do know is that as a one school district, as a K-6 one school district, we don't have the levels and layers that other districts have. So our building administrators, principal, assistant principal, and special ed director are doing not just the roles in the building, but they're doing district roles as well, making presentations to the board on a variety of things that in a Hamden or in a West Haven, a assistant superintendent or someone else will be doing. So that's just an observation in terms of the number. The other interesting thing is, and this is really initial information, but taking a look at student reflections together with in the student data, we did get some initial first glance smarter balance test data in our 3rd through 6th grade from this past spring. And what we have seen is that we have seen definite improvements in math and language arts. As you know, we slipped a bit in the last year or two, and we've seen it gone back the other direction. So this initial information that's come to us and shown us that the 3rd graders in the 4th grade and went up by 6 points, in the 4th to 5th by 7, and the 5th to 6th by 3 points. In the language arts, we saw some increases in math by 6 points and 10 points by 2 grade levels. The average is up around 5 or 6%. So that's good news. So that's just another piece of information too. It doesn't discount anything we talked about tonight, but and there'll be more data about that as we come down into the fall. But we have definitely seen. We're happy to see that the achievement levels of that are in the other direction than some of the data we've seen tonight.
Other questions?
Are there any thoughts on how to increase family responses for the future?
I don't know if you would know just for that.
We do send it out. We've done it by voice, we've done it by email, we've done it kind of by text, we do it by paper. We'll open to any additional suggestions as to how else to get families to respond. The message is repeated.
Do you guys remember what you did different in 2016? Because there was 51.7%
There was a really big
response rate,
spike in
which was
2016.
twice as much as yourselves. So, just curious if there was anything done differently.
I think we did the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'd like to say we did something.
Time of year, I have no,
Marshall?
you never know, like the week, the month.
It was the first time it was done, and it was done at the end of the year.
It was
It
the
was the second time it was done.
second
It was done
time.
in 14.
Well, 14 was.
14 was the first, and that was only 23.8%, and then in 2016, it was 51%.
My recollection on that was that the window, while we typically leave the window open for a set period of time, could be 10 days to 2 weeks, and send reminders to people as they may still not have filled it out. You only get a reminder if you haven't filled it out or done it. I think the window there was open a lot longer, and there was just continued
Badgering of
I think
girls.
so, maybe that's worth doing.
Yeah, finally, enough, I'll fill it out. I don't want to get another one of those emails. So I think that that could be a way to get more responses, because in a sense, sometimes those who respond, this has been said by others other than me, that, I really want to respond to that because I really don't like the ... or it could be, I really like this, so I want to make sure I fill it out and let them know. So that's a very unscientific way of looking at that, but I think it's something we should focus on.
My other question, does Panorama have a parent survey? I know, because we developed our own,
Yes,
which is why.
and
I know we've been hesitant to switch, but I feel like you're hearing, like, people don't like some of the questions. Maybe it's time that we just take it on the chin and just switch the survey to something that we think is better reflecting of what we can track over time. It's 1 year, we won't have something to compare to. I'm sure some of the questions overlap, but maybe we should look at what the parent survey is from Panorama so that we can have some norms. I don't know what other people think, but I feel like.
Well, I think what you had said about the norms, let's find out more about them, make sure we're okay with that, and then I think it would make sense to.
And other options even include, for instance, if, we have opportunities even for the teacher, staff, and student to change the buckets of questions that, if we wish to do, and still to be able to retain certain questions. If we still wanted to track the question about how the behavior of other students affect my learning, we could still pull that question out and continue to measure it while we change the bucket of other questions if you so choose to. So, yeah, those are all options.
I just wanted to follow up on the focus group aspect. I appreciate your suggestion of checking in to see how we're doing, what progress we're making. I was wondering if we could consider gathering this data in a confidential way so that we could really be sure that teachers feel comfortable and staff as well, comfortable in letting us all know how things really are.
Well, this is a confidential survey.
Yes, the
so it
survey
means,
is
and some of the
that.
results, it looks like people were not afraid to share exactly how they may have felt at that
So
moment.
maybe this is a better format than, I don't know.
Than a focus group, you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay,
the focus group, because a focus group,
Yeah.
I'm worried that people might not really feel comfortable voicing.
Sure.
I think you don't do one or the other, but I think that you're not going to be able to improve climate among people if they're not willing to talk about what would make things better. So I would be hopeful that when you do focus groups, it's more about how do we make the place better, not saying why are you unhappy, but what are the things we can do as a team to make things better. And that opens people up to not being worried, they're not complaining, they're saying we appreciate, well,
Which is why we have to dig into some more of these questions.
Right.
Some of them we're not exactly sure what someone is trying to get at when they respond in a not so favorable way.
Can I make one more observation? It's been a year since the enrichment committee, ad hoc enrichment committee convened, and since then, I've been looking particularly at the survey results that might suggest what kind of progress we've made. So when you look at questions like students are appropriately challenged, you're looking at 59% favorable responses. Teachers have high expectations at 76%. There's differentiation at 62%. School leadership has made high expectations explicit at 60%, appropriate amount and challenge of homework is 56%. So I'm wondering whether it might be worthwhile following up in a meaningful way the work that we started with the ad hoc enrichment committee. Just given that the feedback here suggests that there's still a lot of room for improvement.
Any other questions on the survey? Thank you very much. Okay. And did we get our ERS update already?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Okay. Finance Committee, yes. I was the chair, so I'll finish up on the budget. So we approved the budget items in the consent agenda. The main item that we have to deal with in the Finance Committee report is the annual line item transfers. So in your agenda, let's see what page it's on. It is the last page of everything. Essentially, throughout the year, we make some adjustments. Things were over budget, things were under budget. We don't change any of the budgetary items as we move along, so that we can track where we are with variances throughout the year. And then what we do is at the end of the year, before the fiscal year closes, we do a single multiple page line item transfers to bring everything into budget, so we're moving things in the budget. So we generally, you have it before you. I'm happy to go over any of these things in detail. It's all in the budget. Essentially, this just gets the budget line items everywhere to zero.
I'll move that we approve the 2018-2019 line item budget transfers as submitted by the administration.
Questions?
Then we can have Joyce. Then we can have discussion.
Questions? Discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes. Okay. CABE liaison report. Since you haven't given that spot up yet.
So I know we have a few new faces on the board. One of the things for CABE offers some great trainings, some PD for Board of Ed members, some training for new Board of Ed members. I would encourage folks, old and new, to consider going. There's 3 coming up. There's a CABE Leadership Conference at Water's Edge in Westbrook on Wednesday, August 7th. That would be great. I think Bob will probably be there.
I will not be there
No.
this year because
Okay, you've gone the last couple
because
years.
the plane's not coming back. The plane's not going to be in sync with CABE, but I would highly recommend that
Yeah.
those who have not gone to that consider that. It's a great one day.
I know I won't be in town either, so I've gone before and it was great. But if others are able to, that would be a good thing to go to. There's also the CABE CAPS conference, which I would encourage all of us to go to if possible. That's November 15th.
Should we just let you know?
You can, or Marcia really is probably the best coordinator, but yeah, either way.
And if you can make one day, but not 2 days, is that okay?
For the CABE CAPS conference, absolutely. Yep, you can do one or the other. Yep. Or both, yep. And then another, in December, there's a new board member and leadership kind of mini conference as well, December 10th, so that's a later deadline, but just put that in everyone's calendars.
Thank you. Public comment.
Well, can I ask, am I allowed to ask a question? I was wondering whether we could add to the agenda at some point, safety issues. So teachers have mentioned that they are concerned about safety issues in the classroom. And so I think we kind of promised in a soft way that we would address them in some way. So I don't know how to raise the agenda item, but if that's something that we could put on some future agenda, that would be great.
We discussed, and there's there might be a number of things in our retreat that we'll discuss that we're going to make sure that happen. So we can talk about it at the retreat and then plan out what it looks like and when it's going to be.
That sounds good. May I also ask a administrative question? I was wondering if I could request that the meeting materials for the Board of Ed meetings it's distributed at 5 p.m. on Friday, and if we want to give you a heads up for the weekend, before the BOE meeting, there is nothing but the weekend in between. And so we want to be respectful of your weekend, but we also want to be respectful to the weekends of board members as well, because it does take time to read, digest, think about the issues, and it's hard to do that when you have family around and you have to do family things on the weekend. So you requested it, but
Just so from an administrative standpoint, I understand the question. I think this is a historic. I'll use that word loosely, but Marcia is more of a historian than myself. The typical board meetings have been on Mondays since ever, and the Friday has been usually when it's been posted. Now doesn't mean it can't be changed, but there's. I think what I would like to suggest is perhaps two things. One is have a chance to talk about this at the board retreat, because there's some implications here for getting presentations done well. And then also it has implications for part of our agenda, as you know, each month we look ahead to the next month and say, what do we want to make sure this presentation does include, so our thoughts as board members are captured in that presentation. So if it's if it works for the board, I would like to suggest we talk about this at the retreat, just so we can address that, kind of just talk about it in the roundtable.
Okay. Public comment. No public comment. I will take motion.
I'd like to just, if I may, for a moment, I'd like to extend a few thank yous, as this will be my final meeting as a board member for the Woodbridge Board of Education. I'd like to thank the town of Woodbridge and the people of Woodbridge for placing their trust in me, all of my colleagues on the Board of Education for your time and volunteering for this important board, to Superintendent Gilbert and the Superintendent's office, as well as Marcia DeGennaro, to Principal Prisco, Assistant Principal Sherman, and the entire future administration, not only for your tireless work in reporting to the board and the town, but also in the care of my children and all of the children in this town. Of course, the teachers and the students in this wonderful town and at this school. And finally, a thank you to the town and the board for the beautiful commemorative mantle clock. So thank you very much, and I wish you all Godspeed in what's to come. It's a great school district, and will continue to be one. So thank you.
And good luck to you in your new endeavor. Thanks. All right. Motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Motion carries. We will have a brief non-meeting.
Yeah.